Hey friends, I hope you're doing well. I just heard about Joe Ely passing away and I wanted to say a few words and pay my respects. I'm a huge Flatlanders fan. I really love the Flatlanders. What's the album, The More Legend in a Band? Just really love that. The imperfections of all of that just struck me in a wonderful way. And I don't think you can overstate how important when Joe Ely opened up for The Clash at the Armadillo World Headquarters, just how important that was. There's an interview here on the channel, maybe I'll link to it at the end of this video, with my buddy John D. Graham. His band, The Skunks, was the first band on that bill that night, and he describes it as looking out into the audience and seeing cowboy hats everywhere, mohawks, and ponytails. He's like, there's the cowboys that are just like working stiffs on ranches or something coming in to see Joe Ely. There was mohawks coming in to see The Clash, and the hippies that just were there because they heard there was a happening scene, something cool happening, and they wanted to witness it and be part of it. And to get those crazy, those flavors, those spicy flavors, we'll say, and throw them together into one stew. It seems like that they wouldn't go together, but it actually made for something amazing. And the Austin music scene that we think of today was kind of born in moments like that. And also, I remember I've had an ongoing email relationship and sometimes phone call relationship with the great Lloyd Maines, who is a great producer, has done so many things, but a lifelong friend and bandmate to Joe Ely. And I just would ask him about different things about Strummer and Ely, and he just offered so many wonderful things. I tried to do an interview. We've both tried to get together, and our schedules have never lined up, and it's probably going on 6 or 8 years, if not more, of trying to make that happen. But he'd sent me pictures of of Joe Ely and The Clash, and Lloyd rehearsing at the, what was it called? The Hope and Anchor in London. If you've seen the video for One Step Beyond by Madness, that was filmed there. Now imagine that little bitty stage, The Clash and Joe Ely's band, like sitting there, you can see Lloyd on the steel guitar, with The Clash around him. Just beautiful. Just beautiful moments like that really get me going. I was trying to think of different things that pop out in my head. I've never met Joe Ely, but I've been in the room with him a few different times. I'm very unaggressive. I wouldn't just walk up and say hey to him, but a big fan. I was trying to think of some things that stand out. I remember Michael Corcoran, who's a friend of the channel and passed away a couple years ago. There's interviews here on the channel with him. A great journalist in Austin. He wrote an article in the Austin American Statesman at one time about Joe Ely. He would see people, what the hobos would call flying a sign, where you have "will work for food" written on cardboard or something. He would see homeless people holding something like that. They might say something more clever than that. And he'd seen some signs that he liked, and instead of giving somebody, this is Joe Ely, instead of giving them a handout, he would offer to buy the sign, and in hopes that maybe they would think about themselves as an artist, who are making things and selling it to people. And I guess he had a pretty good collection of those, and Michael Corcoran wrote an article about that, and Joe's thinking about that. And I cannot find that article online anywhere. It was the Austin American Statesman. I can find references to it, but I can't find the article. Maybe somebody out there knows where it's at, and they can point me to it. It'll be fun to read it again. And Michael's no longer with us, so I can't email him and ask him for it. But one thing I did stumble across, which I think is pretty damn great. The last place I usually look for information about people is their bio, because bios are just terrible, and they're just terrible. I think Slade Cleaves has the best bio of all time, is what I say. It says, lives in Texas, writes songs, makes records, travels around, tries to be good. That's the entire bio. And it's like, what else do you really need to know? And so if Slade's out there, I love you, man, and I hope you're doing well. But having said that, I think Joe might take the cake here. This is really good. He has this bio is pretty much a bunch of factoids, just random small factoids, and they're pretty amazing. And I'm just going to read a few of those, and I urge you to go. It's like ely.com/bio. It's worth reading through. I'll hit a few of these for you to give you an idea. It says, became ill and close to death at age 7 with borderline rheumatic fever, missed 4 months of school. Saw Jerry Lee Lewis playing on a flatbed trailer in an Amarillo dust storm when he was 6 years old. Attracted by free hot dogs and Cokes, his parents nudged up to the front of the stage. A Pontiac dealer is selling cars. He announces, a piano-playing fool from Faraday. He remembers the microphone blowing over from the strength of the wind and everyone wearing bandanas over their noses. Jerry Lee Lewis on a flatbed. Goes on to say he took guitar lessons from a friend's brother-in-law, and later found out the house where he took guitar lessons, like 30 years later, he found out that was the house Buddy Holly used to live in. That's pretty cool. And then there's another place where he took more guitar lessons, and he found out 30 years later that's where Buddy Holly took guitar lessons. Rode a motorcycle down the hallways of Monterey High School on the first day of his freshman year. How many of us have done that? His band, The Twilights, opened for Jimmy Reed at the Cocoa Palace when he was 15. Jimmy Reed got drunk and never performed that night. Got expelled from Monterey High School for singing Cherry Pie at a school assembly. I don't know what Cherry Pie is. I feel kind of bad about that. I feel like I should know that. So the first time he ever saw a $100 bill was in a Lubbock speakeasy called the Hideaway Club. Hall of Fame quarterback Bobby Lane, who was out on the town with fellow Yankee star Mickey Mantle, tipped Joe $100 for playing Willie Nelson's The Nightlife. That's the greatest night of a lot of people's life right there. Bobby Lane and Mickey Mantle giving you $100 because you know Willie Nelson's Nightlife. He played the Cellar Club in Fort Worth and Houston, alternating sets from 6 in the evening until 6 in the morning with a band called American Blues. Now, a lot of you know exactly who that band ended up being. Ended up being ZZ Top. After he moved to Austin, he was playing in a club that later became Stubbs Barbecue, but he would trade songs in the same way with Stevie Ray Vaughan all night long. This one kind of caught my eye, and I'm not sure what to think about it, but it says, recorded 17 songs with the Flatlanders in Nashville in 1972. Only a few dozen copies were released in the form of an 8-track tape. 10 years later, released on vinyl and cassette in England under the Charlie label. It became a cult hit. 10 years after the Charlie release, the record was released on CD for the first time in America under the Rounder label. The project is released under the title More a Legend Than a Band. Though the record has sold hundreds of thousands of copies, none of the Flatlanders have received any record royalties. That's, I actually got to meet the 3 founders of Rounder, and my first reaction is to defend them because, man, I kind of believe they're what's right about this music world. Those 3 founders, they later sold it to a big corporation, and I'm guessing that's where whatever shenanigans with royalties or whatever took place, but I don't know that. I'm just saying that off the top of my head. My first inclination is to defend the 3 founders around her. But it's an ugly story either way, though. Joe joined Ringling Brothers Circus in the summer of 1974 and took care of the llamas and the world's smallest horse. He later took care of the Arabian and Belgian horses, played every stop in Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. In Houston, he was kicked unconscious by the lead horse as the elephants were being led by famed trainer Gunther Williams. Gunther witnessed Joe's accident and temporarily left his elephants to pull Joe to safety. This event probably saved Joe's life. He hitchhiked back to Lubbock down Highway 36 with 2 broken ribs and laughed only when necessary. That is crazy. Absolutely crazy. There's a long list of stuff. That's just the stuff in the 70s, I believe. But there's a section where it talks about meeting the Clash over in England after a gig and becoming friends. And it makes sense that he would become friends with Joe Strummer. Joe Ely grew up loving Woody Guthrie. Joe Strummer idolized Woody Guthrie. They both loved rock and roll, that early rock and roll stuff. And which led to them doing a lot of stuff together. They went to the studio, I believe, the next day. Joe Ely and his band went when the Clash was recording London Calling. They were in the studio there, and they just became friends, and then later toured together and all of that. When I read all of that stuff, I can't help but think about all of the legends that we grew to love from that generation. I think one of the reasons they stand out so much is because they lived so much. Before he was ever famous or successful or whatever, Joe Ely was hopping trains and hitchhiking. There's a story about him picking up Townes Van Zandt outside of Lubbock when Townes was hitchhiking, and that's how they met. And Townes gave him the album, and they went back, and him and Jimmy Dale and Butch listened to it, and like, this guy's good, an understatement there. But all of that stuff, joining the circus and having all of those strange encounters and all of that doesn't happen anymore. People aren't like that. And I think that's one of the reasons that the legends from that generation, that's why we look at them the way we do, is we realize these cats were different. They were out there trying to find something and living life the best they could. And I think that shows in the music. It shows in the art, no matter what you're doing. Much love to everybody out there who's a Joe Ely fan and anybody that was close to him. I'm going to put a video up right here of John D. Graham talking about that night at the Armadillo with Joe Ely opening up for the Clash. And it's really good stuff. And go ahead and watch that, and I'll see you somewhere down the road. Much love to you.